an endless barrage of beeps, whistles, clicks, and noises. To casual listeners, an irritating collection of senseless sounds. But to the serious shortwave enthusiast, these noises are symbolic of the fascinating hobby of shortwave listening. Buried amidst the squawks and groans of your receiver is a world of intrigue. 905 564 905 564. Is this a spy station? Many listeners think so. But so far, no one has answered the question for sure, at least publicly. These so-called numbers stations are found on many frequencies, broadcasting their cryptic messages in several languages. They follow a regular schedule. Numbers broadcasts in English are rare. Most are in Spanish. One of those transmitters is in Havana, Cuba. Modern technology has developed an incredible array of methods to transfer information from one place to another via the miracle of radio communications. Some of these methods are as simple as on and off keying of the radio signal itself. We call this continuous wave, or CW. These Morse code signals populate the shortwave spectrum and are easily recognized by their single tone dots and dashes when monitored by a receiver with its VFO turned on. Oh, occasionally, some commercial and military stations are heard using frequency shift keying. In this mode, the signal or carrier wave is always on, even when the operator's key is up. When he presses the key, the frequency of the carrier wave shifts slightly, and a change in pitch is heard. To remove the distracting second pitch, the listener merely tunes his receiver dial to lower the pitch of that unwanted key up tone until it can no longer be heard, and then copies normal Morse code. A much more commonly used form of frequency shift keying is radio teletype, or RTTY, as its RTTY abbreviation is pronounced by its users. It sounds very similar to FSK CW. The teletype signal is composed only of dots, however, and is usually much faster than CW. Teletype sends only letters, numbers, and punctuation. To send pictures, a different technique is used. Facsimile is a method of sending sounds which correspond to contrast changes. Weather maps, photographs, and other pictorial information sound much like a badly scratched phonograph record as they are traced line by line and sent over the air. Slow scan television is another method occasionally used to transmit visual images by radio. While nowhere nearly as clear as the picture on your home TV, Slow scan is useful for sending images of non-moving subjects. One important application of radio is in the transmission of data from point to point. Remote measurements of wind, rainfall, water levels, pressure, or any other parameters may be converted to tones, which are transmitted and then decoded back again into useful information many miles away. Most of the Western world sets its time and frequency measuring equipment by one of two government broadcasting facilities. WWV at Fort Collins, Colorado, transmits precisely on 2.5, 5, 10, 15, and 20 megahertz. So 19 hours, 25 minutes, coordinated universal time. In addition to time signals, WWV also provides regular propagation reports to listeners. CHU is located at Dominion Observatory, Ottawa, Canada, and broadcasts at 3.33, 7.335, and 14.67 megahertz. Canada, in standard time, 6 hours, 24 minutes. Eager. Not all radio signals transmit long enough to be heard as tones, or even seem to contain information. Pulse transmissions are created as a train of consecutive sharp bursts of radio energy. Each pulse may last for only a few thousandths of a second. Pulse transmissions are often used for navigational purposes, like those of the Coast Guard's Loran. You don't need your BFO on to hear these powerful signals just below 2 megahertz. Best monitored at night. Other navigational beacons may be heard by tuning just below the Loran signals. Amplitude modulation, or AM, is most commonly heard being used by international broadcasting stations and CBers. It is easily tuned in by unsophisticated listeners using modest radios. But AM has its disadvantages. For one thing, because of the amount of spectrum space taken up by an AM signal, atmospheric disturbances sometimes alter portions of the radio wave. This causes a peculiar distortion called selective fading. The atmosphere may be even less discriminating and cause the entire signal to flutter in strength. Sunrise and sunset are among the greatest influences on this phenomenon. Propagation refers to the path taken by a radio wave after it leaves the transmitting antenna. As we've already heard, the Earth's ionosphere, the upper portion of the atmosphere, can do strange things to radio waves. Multipath is another of those things. It results from some reflected radio waves arriving at your antenna slightly later than the more direct waves. You may hear both of these waves, and the resulting delay sounds like an echo. To protect their coveted frequencies from intruders, and to enable listeners to tune in to the correct dial setting before programming begins, international broadcasters transmit a repeating musical theme known as an interval signal. One of the most familiar to shortwave listeners is that of Germany's Deutsche Welle. While we're on the subject of international broadcasting stations, let's listen to a sampling of the infinite variety of programming available from around the world. Our own National Telecommunications and Information Administration operates powerful transmitting facilities throughout the high-frequency spectrum. Both the Voice of America and American Forces radio and television services may be heard on several frequencies every time you tune through the broadcast band. Commonly presenting regional programming to satisfy their diverse listening audience, Radio Canada International features many languages and broadcasts to a wide geographical territory.
For our African listeners, so that you can hear us again in half an hour's time, that's 2000 hours GMT, here are the frequencies. 17820, 15325, 9555, and 7295 kilohertz in the 16, 19, 31, and 41 meter bands. Quelques instants, cette émission en français dirigée vers l'Europe et l'Afrique, c'est une même fréquence. This is William McCormick.
Hello, Lydia McCullough.
In Montreal. See you soon.
Cheerio for now. Typical of the many productions designed for political persuasion, Radio Moscow is a formidable contestant for shortwave frequencies.
You lost the world physics. It is 20 hours Moscow time, 17 hours Venezuela time. The news, read by Marina Dubova. First, the headline.
Not to be outdone, Radio Peking seeks its share of the listening audience, as does Radio Hanoi and Radio Vietnam, and so on. One of the real pioneers in shortwave broadcasting is the venerable Voice of the Andes, Christian Mission Station HCJB in Quito, Ecuador.
From the heart of the Andes Mountains, we welcome you to a podcast. We invite you to stay tuned for an hour of good listening from the voice of the Andes in Quito, Ecuador. As we present, test it.
And of course, no sampling of international broadcasters would be complete without mention of the British Broadcasting Corporation. BBC World Service. These are but a selected few of the myriad broadcasters from all corners of the earth to be heard on your shortwave receiver. Radio Finland, Voice of Nigeria, Voice of Greece, Radio Japan, and Radio Norway. Just a handful more for your listening fare. Although our sampling has concentrated on English language broadcasts, it must be remembered that shortwave listening is a worldwide hobby. You will encounter languages and dialects you've probably never heard before.
E isso automaticamente tira o interesse daqueles que querem comprar carros maiores e então vão se dedicar aos carros menores.
Because of the increasing numbers of users cramming into the radio spectrum, techniques are being developed to reduce the signal bandwidth required to send information. Two-way voice communications are usually sent by single sideband, which requires less than half the bandwidth necessary for normal AM. SSB is unintelligible without the use of a BFO in the receiver. But switch in the BFO or product protector, and an amazing thing happens. There are other ways to cram large quantities of information into the space normally occupied by just one carrier wave. The processes may be called independent sideband or multiplex. Several messages, voice, teletype, CW, telemetry, or whatever, may be sent at one time. To the simple receiver, this sounds like a buzzsaw. But with the proper equipment, an incredible amount of information is being spewed out on several sub-channels within the bandwidth of that signal. Another advantage of single sideband for communications is the absence of annoying heterodynes from other stations near the frequency. Every CBer knows the familiar sound of AM heterodynes, especially on channel 19. Not all radio signal interference is incidental. Some is intentional. For political reasons, many countries of the world are not too thrilled about their citizens hearing unfavorable propaganda. Often, those countries will transmit defensive signals on the same frequencies as the uninvited broadcaster. These raucous sounds are designed to discourage the listener. A great deal of unintentional interference is generated by shortwave communicators. T-clicks produce every time a Morse code key is depressed and released, may sometimes be transmitted as a clicking noise to be heard at frequencies considerably removed from the carrier frequency. The close cousin of T-clicks is called splatter. It results from overmodulation, and its distorted sidebands may be heard interfering with reception on nearby frequencies. An annoying source of interference encountered at various places throughout the shortwave spectrum is the frequency sweeper, an industrial or scientific measuring device. It is recognized by its swishing sound as it sweeps its frequency back and forth across the dial. As if these sources of radio interference were not enough, the shortwave listener must often contend with a variety of electrical appliance noises as well. One of the most common is that of the fluorescent lamp, commonly encountered at the lower frequencies. Brush-type motor-driven appliances such as electric mixers, hair dryers, and vacuum cleaners are capable of an assault in their own right. Long-term sharp buzzes, especially prominent at night, frequently indicate arcing or discharge in overhead power lines. When a receiver is used near some other electronics equipment, like a scanner radio, signals from that adjacent equipment may often be heard throughout the tuning range of the radio. Nearby TV sets are a common irritant to shortwave listeners. They radiate a variety of incidental signals. Synchronization buzz is most troublesome at low frequencies and easily identified by its repeated appearance as the shortwave receiver dial is tuned through its range. TV sync buzz may be further identified by listening to one buzz frequency and noting how its characteristic sound changes as the TV picture moves. The Russian woodpeckers, arriving suddenly in the mid 1970s, these pulse transmissions blanketed communications around the world. When analyzed with sophisticated receiving equipment, these pulses turn out to be a form of over the horizon backscatter radar, an electronic defense system to detect and identify intruders over the Russian borders for thousands of miles. When these paralyzing signals obliterate shortwave reception, there is little the listener can do but move his dial. But sources of radio signals and interference are not confined to our planet alone. Much of the background noise you hear as hiss is actually cosmic noise. Distant galaxies, the planet Jupiter, and even our own sun radiate broadband signals which may be detected over a large part of the radio spectrum. The sun is especially strong as a noise generator. Solar flares, giant eruptions on the sun's surface, may cause enormous communications blackouts, even after traveling through 93 million miles of space. The following recording was made on a shortwave receiver tuned near 30 megahertz and lets you hear firsthand radio signals from our sun